This virtual festival has been organized by Youth Celebrate Diversity, and the festival is proudly sponsored by Boeing.
Okay. Hello, welcome to today's panel on colorism. My name is Ria Rowan, and I am joined by my segment producer, production teammates, and our lovely panelists. I would like to begin by allowing everyone to introduce themselves, and we will start with Ready Yet.
Hi, I'm Ready Yet. I use the pronouns she, her. I'm currently a junior in Aurora, Colorado, and I'm really excited for this.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jaden Edeyemi. I am a senior from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I will pass it on to Julia.
Hi, I hope everybody can hear me. My name is Julia Torres. I am a librarian and language arts educator in Denver, Colorado, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Glad to be here with y'all today.
Thank you, Julia. And then we'll pass it on to Michaela.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Michaela. I am a freshman at Howard University, but I currently live in New Mexico, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, everyone. So let's just jump right in. The first question that we have for you guys is, what is colorism and who benefits from it? And you guys can feel free to just jump in.
I can say that I first really learned about colorism not too long ago. I was trying to find a way to talk to my students of color, who are 98% Black and brown, about the racism that we would experience. And I see my brother Jose has joined us, so I want to pause for him to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Jose Wilson. I've been a math teacher for the last 15 years, and now I'm a full-time grad student at Teachers College, Columbia University. But in addition, I am also executive director of EduColor, an organization dedicated to race, class, and education. Thanks for having me, y'all. Please, after you, Julia.
Okay. So as I was mentioning, I first kind of learned about colorism when I was trying to find a way to talk about it with my predominantly Black and brown student body, because there was so much, I would say, intracultural and interracial colorism that we were experiencing. Predominantly it would show up in the form of name calling and folks, discriminating against. I had a Cuban student who was, I would say she was, to be honest, a little bit darker than me, but probably, very close in skin tone to me. And so many of our students would just bully her and treat her in ways that were, despicable, just beneath all of us. So we had to have some conversations about colorism within Black and brown communities in my school, because she was brought to tears by a lot of things that her classmates would say and do. And in the age of social media, I'm sure y'all know, it's horrible. It's horrible. So teaching the bluest eye and talking with students about the ways that we relate to one another were some opportunities that I had to talk about colorism in my environment. Anybody can jump in. Jose, we're just kind of vibing with each other. So I could popcorn. I could call somebody. I'm fine with that.
No, I think that's a good thought process. I think, obviously, as somebody who is a Dominican Haitian American, I recognize the power of discussing colorism, especially because so much of what Latinx representation is often looked at as is often white centering. And in any ways that folks want to talk about Latinx, it always has to be in a spectrum of kind of clearish to like super white. But then, all the folks who I guess would be, even the term Afro Latinx has become problematized in that way, right? We recognize how, like, try to say, oh, well, this person is Latinx, then those of us who are of Negro descent, negros as it were, we're they're always trying to find ways to lighten our skin in order for us to be more accepted as Latinx. All the while, like, there are folks who've been Black. I mean, let's call it for what it is. Like, 95% of enslaved peoples from Africa, for the African continent, came to Latin America. So it's no accident that there are folks who look like myself and Julia and so many others. So colorism is a really big deal when it comes to this diversity conversation writ large.
Yeah, thank you, Jose. And I just wanted to kind of jump off of that, because I think that like colorism also means different things in different communities. And I've had conversations with Sister Rediet about this, that like, as a Black American, I don't consider myself light-skinned. Like, I don't feel that I benefit from being light-skinned in this country, but like if I were to go to Africa, let's say, I would probably be considered light-skinned. So, and I think that's something that like I haven't always thought about, just because I was born here and I grew up here, and I've never thought of myself as light-skinned. So I think like it's interesting to just understand like the dynamics of colorism in different places around the world and how it affects different people based on like where we are, where we come from.
I can pick you up. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to jump off what you said, Jaden. And when I think of colorism, I think that it's just a term that's really deeply rooted in our community, just off of all the way from slavery times, even before that. If you look at slavery, light-skinned African Americans were chosen to be inside the house, while the darker ones were chosen to be more on the fields. And I think that people look at being light-skinned as favoritism as a way, seeing that if you're more closer to like a Eurocentric person's color, then you are automatically put at this higher level than everyone else. And while if you look in Sudan, where actually dark-skinned people are more favored than light-skinned people, it's the exact opposite. But I think through time, even though people like to say that, well, we're not, I don't remember slavery. I don't remember being connected to slavery. So I don't know why that would affect me. If you look at, in the culture, like hip hop and all that stuff, you always see rappers with lighter skinned women and always bashing down darker skinned women. And I think that we are subconsciously just programmed to think as, to look at race as a way of leveraging people as to who's better and who's not better. Just simply off, not of where they came from, but just because of how the color of their skin, which I think is really interesting because as a Black community, we always say that we don't want to be judged off of the color of our skin, but we do the exact same thing to people in our own community. And I've seen a lot of things happen like this in my own home country in Cameroon, where where it's actually really encouraged for girls my age to bleach their skin and to be more white, because fair is seen as a sign of beauty. And I think that it's just mostly just due because of that subconscious training showing that we leverage the colors of people's skin, and not always for the best.
Yeah, thank you, Michaela. Next, I want to ask you guys, what is the difference between racism and colorism?
I've always been led to believe that racism is the inherent belief in the superiority of one's own race above others. And colorism manifests, as you all were saying, within our own groups who might be perceived by the outside world as, we'll just take Blackness, for example. We might all be seen as Black, but then there are those of us within the Black diaspora who, either because of colonial structures or because of internalized racism, or both, we managed to attain a certain level of social positionality, socioeconomic position, white adjacency, that might make us treat others in a way that is not that different from how racist folks act toward us who are not in the same group. And I'll just add, just backing up off of what was said earlier, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who is very light skinned, but she swore for most of her life that she was like a nice caramel brown. That's how she perceived herself. And I was telling her that I never perceived myself in all the states I've lived and all the countries I've been and lived. I never perceived myself as a light skinned Black woman. And then I started to think about this idea that maybe all of us perceive ourselves to be Blacker than we actually are because of our experiences in the world and how people treat us. So I think racism is a train of thought, it's a school of thought, but it's also a code of behavior. And then as we know, it's embedded within these societal structures.
I was using that middle school wait time. I'm sorry. So, you know what I'm saying? But Julia's absolutely correct. And something that I think, especially when it comes to thinking about the human aesthetic, is when you look at racism, it really is this confluence of social structures and phenotypes and other things that people believe that they can decipher about a person, right? And then try to assign those categories accordingly to whatever structure it is. And in American society especially, you could be a light-skinned Black person and still be affected by racism. But then where colorism comes in is very much pronounced in the hue in which we also live in, right? The skin that we're in. So that confluence is super critical when it comes to racism and how it's there's that construct, right? But then colorism, it really is about the eye of the beholder. And considering how even within an intra-racial relationships, right? Thinking about folks who either consider themselves Latinx, Black, Asian, whatever. Like there are conversations within Asian communities where people are talking about Filipinos versus Koreans versus folks who are Chinese mainland. Even within China itself, like people say, "Oh, there's not racism in the same way that there is in America." I'm like, I beg to differ, and colorism often has a lot to do with some of that. So. And the ways that we can actually, directly address colorism and how, even just being able to look at somebody and say, well, all the things that America has to offer does not belong to you because of the color of your skin is a really big deal when it comes to this conversation.
Do you guys think that colorism affects male and females differently?
I mean, I should speak on that, seeing as how I believe I'm the only male presenting panelist on that. Yes, I do believe that there is definitely a difference in the ways that colorism manifests amongst those of us who are darker skinned and Black and male versus darker skinned Black and women, and or not to mention our LGBTQIA plus community, right? There are certain privileges that those of us who are darker skinned male are allowed to have in the ways of whether we look at history, right? For example, like whose histories get told, whose histories get lauded, who gets recognized for leadership positions, that sort of thing. And there's plenty of complicated conversations to be had, but I think it's become even more like highlighted when you look at even just plain old aesthetics and how women are often the targets of any number of violent acts because of the color of their skin, as well as being Black or being Latinx and Black and all the other manifestations of that, right? So yes, I think it does manifest differently. It is not to say, however, like when you isolate Black male folks alone, that there aren't issues with that all throughout, right? So how many folks who are light-skinned Black males get an opportunity or get the benefit of a doubt or get the house that they want at the price that they want versus those of us who are darker skinned? Who gets to hide purses around me versus somebody who's more lighter skinned, right? Those are conversations worth having just within that construct. But if you're comparing, women to men, or you're comparing men to anyone else who falls within our spectra, I think that's a worthy conversation to have for sure.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that a lot of it also has to do with like patriarchy too. I think already like as Black women we're pushed to the margins, and that kind of ties into colorism because like we glorify dark-skinned men, right? But when we talk about like dark-skinned women, we don't appreciate that. We only appreciate Black women when they are more light-skinned or more exotic. So I think that it's also just like the power that men are allowed to have over women because of the patriarchy. And it kind of, it's like we're all Black, right? But then we have men who have that power, and so they're allowed to use that over Black women. And so I think that that definitely ties into like the idea of colorism and thinking that Black men can kind of just exist while Black women have to fit into like this one box of what we want them to be.
I think for women also, I think colorism has manifested into something more where it's also about the features that we have. I think like when you're light skinned, everyone thinks you're supposed to have like nice straight hair and a small nose and something like that. So I just think it's manifested into something more of light skinned women looking or having more white features.
And let's talk about appropriation, right? Because white women will do anything to have full lips. From what I'm not, maybe I said that in a harsh way, but I've seen all these lip plumpers and injectables and, lip gloss that claims it's like a bee sting when you put it on and people say it hurts, and like go into all these lengths to have these full lips. But yet when somebody Black actually has those, then people want to have all kinds of horrible things. I've heard horrible things throughout my childhood and adolescence about my full lips. And, so that's just one feature. But I agree with you. I think it does come down to the shape of one's features. And there are many East African folks who would have what some people might say are Northern European, like small, thin nose and like a longer face, but very, very dark skin. And so it's interesting to see how those things play out regionally or geographically as well. And I can tell you, in Brazil, they have about, I want to say, at least 40 different names for skin shade that are also correlated to hair color. And they don't have anything to do with feature, but mostly it's like you can be counted as castaña if your skin is the color of like a cashew, and then you're just castaña. That's good, whatever. It's not like black and white. And it seems like here in the United States, everybody is either on some side where they're closer to white and more white adjacent. And if your skin doesn't get you there, then your speech, mannerisms, whatever will. And then other folks are, closer to Black. And so I think that's kind of something that, at least in my experience, is very uniquely American, though we know the colonial structure of having folks at the very top of that pyramid being those who immigrated from the place, holding on to the culture, religion, skin color, what have you, and keeping their bloodlines marrying pure by marrying only people who were from that original place. And then at the very bottom are the imported African slaves. And then, power, privilege, money, all that stuff just went along that pyramid. So I find it interesting when you talk about that pyramid of colonization and what it looks like today, because you can find a lot of videos on YouTube about beauty standards of beauty all over the world. And it's so interesting because connecting them back to those colonial roots is something that I like to do, just so that my students can see that we are still living with that complicated legacy.
And Michaela, if you would like to jump in, I'd like to give you some.
Oh, okay. I think what you said when it came to the speech, brought in more than just colorism, but also the terminology of code switching, which I think is really prominent in our community. And I think it's a problem just because I don't know how to place this correctly, but I think in my opinion, when you look at the white and the people of color community, you can see that there's a lot of things that are accepted and not accepted. When, for example, a lot of the culture, mannerisms, and even styles and things like that are taken from the people of color community, especially the African American community. But on one hand, they still want us to change ourselves, either not just visually, but how we speak and how we act with everyone else to make ourselves more fitting, which I find really interesting because while they highlight our individuality on a large platform, they don't allow us to be our true selves in public. Like when it comes to getting a job, you have to talk a certain way, act a certain way, dress a certain way to get a job. And yes, I know professionalism is correct, but I think it also comes into the perspective of changing who you are. Like there's certain jobs that I can hold that I can't wear my natural hair because I know that they'll find that not professional. And I think that brings into question, like, well, if I can't wear my own natural hair, how come white people can wear their own natural hair? Just because my hair isn't naturally straight, or maybe my hair can't go through a curling iron, why do I have to mold myself into their own perspective of beauty? If they like to say that beauty is subjective to the eye of the beholder, then why is it that they'll only accept a dark woman if she has certain features such as a beautiful face and the correct body shape? Why can you not just accept someone for who they are, regardless if they fit the societal norms or things like that? And I think that brings into, I think it's just because we allow ourselves to be trapped in our own sense on what people who literally didn't even think that people of color should even have the right to vote control who we are and how we act and what is correct for our own selves. And while I think we made a lot of progression through society, through like the Crown Act and protesting for correct, fair voting rights, there's a lot to be done. I think there's a lot of things that the white people community just need to just be quiet and listen, because even though you spend a lot of years advertising and advocating and protesting, it gets down to the point where you have to just sit down and let them understand. There's going to be things that they're never going to understand because they're not us. They're not people of color. They don't understand what it feels like to be oppressed. They're never going to understand. And I think that we have to just bridge the gap between not only ourselves, between the light-skinned African-American people and dark-skinned African-American people, but also between the Black community itself and the Caucasians.
Yes, thank you for sharing, Michaela. And we have just a few minutes left, but I wanted to jump off of what you were just talking about by asking the rest of you, how do we break this cycle of colorism? And like, what do we need from our allies, from lighter skinned allies and white people to break this cycle?
I'm going to speak first because I need y'all to have the last word. So it's real. So what I would say is twofold, thinking about how, as I'm listening to y'all, especially, I mean, this is powerful, powerful stuff. Recognizing that, the political is personal. Wearing your hair the way that you want to wear it is a political statement, especially for Black women, especially for Black men, especially for Black non-gender conforming folks. Any number of us who, decide that at one point we are not going to uphold whatever the white structures say that we're supposed to be able to do, whether we're in a professional setting, scholarly setting, etc. That really matters. So I would suggest, number one, understanding and embracing our political selves is actually a manifestation of us wanting to be our best personal selves. And then secondly, and this goes right back to a couple of what y'all have said, is that like, these are just ways for folks to institutionally try to make us place second. There is no reason, and we should go with the premise that none of us are second, and we will never settle for second. We are going to be our fullest, best selves in the spaces that we're in. And that's going to be the line that we hold. It can't be that our institutions constantly ask us to play second fiddle just because of their own racist, sexist, homophobic natures. Those are things that are worth calling out, and we can't allow folks to try to allow us to be second rate, second fiddle just because of their own ridiculous and mediocre natures.
I need y'all to have the last word too, so I'll just be quick and say that it is going to require passing the mic. We all need to be aware of our own privilege and positionality and pass the mic. We just need to do that. We can all do better at that. I'm constantly checking myself. If I'm on a panel and I am the only Black person, then how am I making sure that I'm promoting the books of our extremely Black authors, our non-gender conforming authors? Like we all, just in whatever place we show up, we need to make sure that we are passing the mic and making space for folks who don't have the privilege or positionality that we have.
And I think I want to let Michaela have the last word since she is one of our guests today, so take it away.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I think the best way to end colorism is to just create more platforms where diversity can be shown. We've seen it happen before with Fenty Beauty coming out with multiple lines of foundation shades, Fenty Beauty's Fenty again with her lingerie shows showing all different types of diversity, from people who are paraplegic to people of color and people in other groups, which I think is really important. And besides that, we should also look...
Sorry, can I use your charger, please? My thing is dead.
Sorry, excuse me.
Okay. Great.
Okay, that was really awkward. I'm sorry.
No worries.
But back to what I was saying, I think we should look at this. I think I agree with what you were saying about using our political selves to advocate, but I think we should look at this from a governmental standpoint and try and enforce more regulations and laws that allow people to be their true selves without feeling that they're going to be discriminated against, lose their job, or go to jail for. So I think like the Crown Act was a very good step in the right direction, allowing women of color to wear their hair wherever they please without being feared of losing their job. But we should also look at a standpoint of wearing clothing, allowing people to wear their ethnic clothing at work and deem it professional, and allowing people to advocate for their heritage and who they are on a larger platform. Letting librarians in certain schools allow people to teach and recommend books from people of color and from other places around the world that give different perspectives on the people of color community, and allowing more education, especially on the elementary and middle school level, on how colorism affects people in America, and more on the Black diaspora effect on how we grew up and how America is centered from that perspective, because it's not really shown. All you learn in majority of schools is about slavery, and that's about it. And it should be more about that. You should learn more than just Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. There are more people out there who have made larger impacts today and will forever. They should learn about Lonnie Johnson, the guy who made the Super Soaker. There's more people out there who've made such large impacts that we don't know about because we haven't been given the platform to learn about it, and that's what America should focus on doing.
Thank you, Michaela. And that concludes our panel on colorism for today. I would like to thank all of our speakers and everyone watching. We appreciate you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, y'all. This was awesome. Loved learning from you.
Thank you.